If you're listening to this podcast, we assume it's probably because you're interested in investing, right? Investing.
Maybe, just a little bit.
Making money.
Yeah.
Growing your wealth.
Being rich.
So we're doing a boot camp. This is for anyone that has been thinking, I need to start investing, but has been kicking the can down the road. Perhaps you haven't even split your pay properly. Maybe you don't even know how much surplus or amount you should be regularly investing each month.
Or you don't know what an emergency fund is, or you have heard someone talk about investing and making money and you want to get involved. Well, then this is for you. This is our investing boot camp.
And the reason that we're mentioning investing at the same time as personal finance is because the two are so intertwined.
So integrated.
If you want to be investing, you need to know how much you can be investing. If you are in debt, you shouldn't be investing yet. If you don't have an emergency fund, you need to do that first. So this is going to take you from being a total beginner all the way through to having an investment portfolio. So the boot camp includes our money and investing course. So you'll do that over a 4-week period with everyone else that is in the boot camp. You'll have access to a private community. You'll be able to learn and watch and do the whole thing on an app, which we've launched, which is very cool. You will have 2 live sessions with Vic to ask heaps of questions just to make sure that you're keeping up.
Yep.
And you also get an annual membership to the Investing Club. So it is quite the package, actually.
Quite the package.
And we're selling it for half price at the moment. And if you would like to join, you can find all the details in the podcast show notes. We would love to have you there.
Yay, see you there. Just a heads up, in this episode, we'll be touching on some fertility challenges. So if this topic hits too close to home, we totally understand if you need to sit this one out or proceed with care.
A quick note, this episode includes discussion on body image and eating disorders. Please take care of yourself, love your bodies, and while you listen to this, if you need to take a pause or not listen at all, we totally respect that, but we just wanted to give you a heads up that those themes are discussed in today's episode.
Welcome to the Curve Weekly, the podcast that keeps you up to date with all of the money, business, and stock market tea.
Brought to you by the Curves research team. It's the latest insights on what's happening in the stock market, companies, other money-related news so that you can stay educated and ahead of the curve.
You can thank us later for sounding smarter than those finance bros at your next dinner party. Those are fun pants.
Do you like them?
Yeah.
I bought them in Ireland. Ireland.
Did you like Ireland?
It felt kind of like a European New Zealand. Like it was quite cloudy, grey.
I know. Nothing against the Irish. When you're living in the Northern Hemisphere and you've got Europe on your doorstep, it's kind of...
You reckon Ireland's just a bit blah?
I didn't move across the world to go and visit somewhere like New Zealand. Do you know what I mean?
No,
I know that's really rude and people are probably going to be like screaming.
Oh, see, I loved Dublin. I thought Dublin was really cool. It's really interesting because Dublin's right on the water. And so it's like coastal, but then, and so it's kind of almost small town with beautiful European architecture, but heaps of tech headquarters are there. So there's Google and heaps of other like massive businesses. So it's actually like a really thriving career space. A lot of people I know have moved there for tech or working. Anyway.
That's because of Brexit?
I don't know.
Because is Dublin part of the EU?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, only half of Ireland is.
Yeah, so that's why a lot of headquarters moved to Dublin because it's part of the EU.
Yeah,
in the UK,
which I quite like. So it's got a sort of chilled, low key vibe, but there's really amazing work opportunities, which I think is what New Zealand really struggles with. And the countryside was beautiful.
Now I'm just like flicking through pictures of Dublin.
It's actually cool. Dublin's cool. I mean, I was there for a day, so I don't really have a lot of.
I don't know why. if I'm gonna go on holiday, I want to go sit on a beach. Which sounds so basic.
Oh, you don't like history or any kind of activities.
I mean, Rome was pretty like, yeah, cool, another ruin. No.
Oh my God, you sound like such a brat.
I know. No,
but at least you're being honest. No, you're being honest.
No,
a lot of people would feel the same.
I can appreciate it, but anyway, that does sound very bratty. I think
she just wants to be horizontal. Just give her a beach and some ocean.
Yeah.
And her Isabella bikini.
And the April spritz. And my beach club was so funny. We were deciding where to go on holiday in August. We were talking about having a chilled holiday. And I was like...
I thought you were going to say we were talking about having a children.
No, chilled holiday. And I was like, yeah, I kind of want a chilled holiday, but then I also want to be able to dance on a table.
Yeah.
And Flower Man was like, okay, cool. Yep, we can do a mix of both.
But there are heaps of places in Europe you can do that.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the best part of Europe is you can go to beaches, you can have really chilled relaxed, local, on the beach reading a book, having naps type holiday.
And then you
can just jump in a little
spinning
boat
a white
and head to
tablecloth
it.
and
Yeah.
dancing on the table with
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I like a bit of both.
Where have you decided on?
We haven't.
What are the top contenders?
Oh, don't even get me started.
Really?
He was like, we need to do a knockout round. So we've got.
It sounds so much like it.
I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, we pit off like Mallorca and Milos against each other. And then
You've been to Milos. Don't go back.
I know, but we pick 2. And then whoever wins from that, then they go up against another one. And
That's
I'm like,
quite fun.
But what if we can't decide between Milos and Mallorca? Then he's like, then it's a knockout. And I was just like, oh, dear God, everything's sport related.
Oh. So true. He's like, okay.
He's like, in rugby. And I was like,
no, I don't know in rugby. No, I don't.
I was like, can't we just
pros and
cut
cons
them out
list?
on a piece of paper and flip over 2? And that's where we're going.
You're efficient. He loves a game.
Yeah, no. You know what I started watching last night?
What?
Call Her Alex.
Oh my God, is it good?
Yeah, but I was really into it. And Flower Man.
Context for anyone that doesn't know.
It's Alex Cooper's documentary on Disney Plus, and it's filming her unwell tour. So it's like the lead up to that and like everything, and then it's also kind of behind the scenes of how the podcast came about and like what happened between her and Sophia.
Oh, did they talk about that?
I didn't get that far, but I only watched like half of episode 1. But I was engrossed in it. And Flower Man's like, "Who's this girl?" I was like, I'm going to save this for another day because I can tell.
Oh, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like it was a documentary I really wanted to watch. I didn't want to just have it on in the background. So
Yeah.
I was like, yeah.
I also think
So I'm
that's
excited for this weekend. I think that's going to be
oh my God, okay, maybe. It's on Hulu, isn't it?
Disney Plus.
Oh,
Yeah. It's also interesting how Call Her Getty started. There was so many male podcasts talking about, you know, dating and
Were
having
there?
sex with women, and like, you know, it was a very masculine area. And then Call Her Daddy started, and the reason it took off was because it was a platform where women could talk about their sexuality, their, you know, who they're dating, who, you know, men, and like just be a lot more open. And
I mean, it
like
was
this whole
pretty
female
crass back in the day too. Like
Yeah.
this. Have you listened to the Glug Glug blowjob episode?
no,
Oh, it's
out
out there. Yeah.
Okay.
No, but I just listened to it and I was like, God, no wonder they took off, because
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but the whole sex sells thing. And then also,
Mm.
I mean, and I don't mean necessarily sex sells in terms of women to men. I mean, just the idea of it's such a universal experience that everyone's interested in talking about.
Well, it's so taboo, and to have a podcast where you can secretly listen and know, you know, you're not sitting there
Yeah.
watching.
You're not having
porn
to
or,
share
like,
your own.
Yeah, you're not overtly interacting, if that makes sense. You're kind of secretly being like, as you wait for the
But
tube.
at the start, their conversations were so sexual, and it's evolved so much since then. But it's
Yeah.
kind of like, even if you think of Diary of a CEO, the way that podcast first started was him recording episodes by himself about business, you know?
Yeah.
Like shows, I think when they take off, they can kind of do whatever they want, right?
They have to evolve to stay
Yeah,
relevant,
true.
and like because the whole platform evolves, conversations evolve. Yeah, so but it's
Actually,
really interesting.
On that, I'd love to put a poll in so wherever you're listening, it'll probably show up. So this is not like on Instagram. It'll be if you're listening on Apple or on Spotify. I would love to know if you prefer our episodes that are Vic and I, or when we interview people. And this is not, we're not offended either
No.
way. It's really good to know what episodes people like the most. I have a sneaking suspicion that interviews are starting to become too oversaturated. I could be wrong, because our interviews are not necessarily about, they're meant to be focused on money, right? And I don't think there's that many people that interview with that lens, but it would just be interesting to know what you prefer listening to, because we want to make sure we are evolving too. And if you don't want to hear interviews, or you really want to hear more, it's just helpful
Or you
to
don't
know.
want to hear about us.
Imagine if they're like, I hate both.
Yeah.
Shut up.
But I also think it's a lot more people are using podcasts as a platform to get their message across, right? So you've got really high profile people that are having conversation on podcasts, which they didn't before. So interviews were actually probably quite, you know, like attractive and meaningful back in the day. But now when you've got people like Barack Obama and, you know, like super high profile people coming on a podcast to do a chat, it almost elevates it to a level of you having to have these really, really high profile guests. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents.
I'm confused. What's your
Podcast used to be a platform where you could have really interesting conversations with people that were probably less known.
Oh,
Whereas
I see.
now you've got high profile people
That are
coming in
open to coming
that
on
are, that
podcasts.
want that can see see the reach of podcasts and are like, I want to talk on a podcast, and therefore you don't really care about Mary over here. You want to hear about Barack Obama because it's like, oh my goodness, he's now on a podcast, you know? I think there's been a lot of...
There's a real shift. Well,
yeah.
I mean,
like a celebrity kind of status of,
Yeah, interesting.
Anyway.
Hey, before we get into this episode, I wanted to read an email that came through. And this is just a really good example, I think, of how
we forget sometimes that the language that we use, it's just so ingrained in us.
Well,
in terms
also,
of,
I think you just, I don't know, when you're sitting here in this room, it's just the two of us. There's no one else here.
You kind of forget people are listening.
You sort of forget. And I think that in the last week or so, since there's just been everything that's been happening in California, I think even like Greta Thunberg being captured, I think all of the Elon and Trump's, there's been so much stuff happening all over the world. And it's really given me this appreciation for this podcast, but also the importance of the way we talk about things, the importance that our research is always correct and factual, which you always do an amazing job of. And I think
like, no pressure.
No, but you do. It's like your biggest strength is you're so good at sifting through and being like, this is truth. And sometimes not even putting your opinion on it, just letting people listen and sort of like figure it out for themselves. But
I think it's also, we're always willing to learn and educate ourselves as well. We aren't sitting here saying that we know best, we've got everything right. Yeah, when this email came through, I was like, oh my gosh, of course, like, thank you.
Yeah,
I know.
I
was like, I wasn't like, nah, but we can, it was kind of like, of course. I kind of felt guilty that I hadn't realized
But
that.
I think that rather than feeling guilty, I think it's being really grateful that the way that this was worded was so supportive, but also just bringing light to something that we totally didn't realize we were leaning into. And the other day I was sitting with my flatmates. I can't remember what the context was, but they were like, do you guys get really gnarly stuff? And I was like, do you know what? Everyone's so open to learning that it's not necessarily a F you or you suck or you're this. It's never really a personal attack. It's often in the form of really constructive criticism. And so that's why I thought, and I read them this email and I was like, actually, this is an example of how someone would give us feedback. It's not, fuck you.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm going to leave it anonymous because
we didn't ask her.
We didn't ask her permission for her name.
Sorry.
She said, hi Curve team. First, thank you for everything you put into the show. I've been listening since the very beginning and it's a joy to have a smart, funny, woman-centered space in my feed each week. I genuinely enjoy your dynamic, your wit, and especially the chit-chat. You complement each other. It always feels like catching up with friends while learning about finance, which is exactly what we're going for. That's why I wanted to gently share something from your recent written material. And this was also just for context. We also spoke about this in a similar way in the podcast.
Yes,
so this came back in response to our Curve Weekly newsletter. But I mean, this was throughout our content for the last week. When such polarizing public figures like Trump and Elon were described with phrases like the girls are fighting or compared to Real Housewives, it felt a bit jarring. I know that it was said in jest, but using feminine coded language to mock these men unintentionally reinforces old stereotypes about women, that being dramatic, irrational, or petty is inherently feminine and laughable. That didn't sit right in a show that usually uplifts and respects women. If the goal is to highlight ego, chaos, or narcissism, maybe different phrases could be used to make the point without leaning on negative stereotypes. I say this as a listener who respects what you do and wanted to offer a different perspective. Thank you again for the brilliance, honesty, and laughs you bring to the pod. I'll keep tuning in every week. Warmly, XXX.
Warmly anonymous.
And I just thought, shit, that's such a good point. We've spent, and most news outlets globally have been doing the same thing, talking about the biggest breakup and making it quite like feminine language.
It's all those little things that you subconsciously accept or don't even notice for a lot of women and men that chip away at you and kind of create the society that we live in. And so
there's this interesting phrase, and I don't know if it's commonly known, but the idea of microaggressions. And it can be racial, it can be gender stereotypes, it can be sexuality, anything. But it's kind of like small digs that are not okay. Like, we used to speak about it because we would randomly do accents. And that's a really good example where it's like the undertone is actually, without realizing it, there's a bit of racism there. And it's sort of similar with this. It's not overtly trying to insinuate something, but you accidentally do.
Yeah.
Anyway, just wanted to say thank you for that. And if you ever have any other thoughts, feedback, different perspectives, we're always open to hearing it.
Comes like flooding in. Everyone's like, okay, floodgates are open.
shit.
I don't like how you say this. I don't like, we're like,
But
no.
I think
it's good. It's good. I laugh, but yeah, no, we do always want to be better and more respectful. So please let us know.
And I think there's a real difference between, when people are like, oh gosh, there might be people listening like, you're so PC and like, meh. And it's like, no, actually, we're all learning and evolving. And I would always rather someone bring something like this to our attention than not.
And there might be suggestions or feedback that we don't take on board because we don't consider it
Totally.
helpful or,
It's
like
all a crowdsourcing exercise.
Yeah. But anyway, there has been lots going on. Lots of like little bits of news, not the kind of weekly game changers like Elon and Trump or, it was kind of lots of little things. I was like, what, I could do like a quick fire curve weekly where it's just like boom, 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 boom.
I mean, I'm happy doing that. What I will say is I felt relieved when that was the case because it does just feel like we're constantly having these enormous things happening, and having a little bit more of a low-key week felt good for me, in all honesty.
Well, let's start with Labubus.
Yeah, let's. Do you know, I only just found out about these about a couple of weeks ago.
Soph knows what a Labubu is.
So I didn't, and I had a leaving dinner when I was at home just before I came back to the UK, and a friend had one hanging off her bag. And I was like, oh my God, I love your little furry toy. Like, I was like,
she's like, it's a Labubu.
She's like, it's a Labubu. And I was like, what the hell is that? So I only recently found out about this. And now I've seen it everywhere with people opening these packages and being I hope it's pink, and then it's not.
Yeah.
Can you just give an overview? What is it? Where have they come from? And why do people not know? Is it like Kinder Surprise in terms of?
Yeah. So this is the whole thing, is that it's these blind box collectibles. So you don't know what you're going to get. You could have one and then you buy another one and it's the same one that you've got, and it's the whole unboxing trend is really leading into this. But the reason it's in the Curve Weekly this week is that a human-sized Labubu doll has just sold for $150,000 at auction in Beijing. I read this headline, I was like, oh my goodness, this Labubu craze has just gone crazy.
It was just a name. I love it.
Labubu. For those of you who don't know what a Labubu is, it's like a little monster kind of character. It's quite weird looking. It's not taken from a movie. It's literally just a little monster that's been created by a Hong Kong artist. And anyway, it's just got so popular because of this blind unboxing. There are so many celebrities now that have them. There's like people that have attached them to their Hermes bags, which is like quite wild because that's like a $40,000 bag. Anyway, I started doing some digging and I was like, is this a public company? If it is, I've missed the boat. I spotted this ages ago, but anyway. And it is a public company. There's a company called Pop Mart who owns it, and they own all the rights and distribution and everything to these Labubus. Labubu. And so I went on and looked at the Pop Mart share price. Holy bejesus.
We've missed it.
I'm so gutted.
What happened?
So it is up 600% in the last year. Oh my God. It's up 200% so far this year. Even if in December you were like, oh, these Labubu things, I'm seeing them around a lot, and you'd bought shares, you would.
So 600%, if you'd put in 100, it would have gone up to 600.
Yep.
That is so amazing.
I know.
I'm kind of gutted no one brought this up
if
in the
you'd put in
investing
$1 million, it would have gone to 6 million.
Oh, whoa. Do you know what I think the best
it's
part
quite hard
about
to invest in because Pop Mart is a Hong Kong company. So it's not, I looked on Sharesies and I looked on Trading 212, but there are, if you really wanted to buy it, there's platforms that you can buy it on. But
I think the reason this has done so well is because, well, not the company, but I think the idea of them, and tell me if you've got a different perspective here, but there's not that many things in life that are a surprise in a good way.
Yeah,
Other than,
I love surprise.
We know. Other than something along the lines of gender reveal and not knowing what your baby is, tell me any other good surprises that you ever had. There's not really a lot.
Yeah.
I reckon that rush is rare, and it's just fun to have a little bit of childish.
Well, I remember like back in the day, I used to
gamification.
collect Pokemon cards, and you'd open packets of chips and stuff, and you'd be like, what card have I got? And it was like a big deal to collect all these, different cards. And I'm kind of thinking it's like what Labubu is like. It's like, okay, cool, I've got the blue one, I want the pink one, I want, and you kind of get these rare ones that people can't get. Like, it's a great selling tactic.
How much are they? Because I just want to get one for the fun of opening it.
I think they're like $20 to $50. They're
That's quite cheap.
Yeah, they're not hugely expensive.
Oh my God, I want one.
Yeah, see, this is.
Oh no, I'm so.
But
God.
I think the learning from this is there would have been people out there so early on this trend that all you would have had to do is Google who owns Labubu, and you would have seen it's Popmart. Is Popmart a listed company? And then it would have said yes or no. And then you could have bought shares even back in December. You would have made 200%.
Yeah, that's
like
amazing.
it's not that long ago. That's 6 months ago. I just think it's a really good reminder that having that investing mindset and spotting these investing trends, like they're all around us.
It's really interesting because you always used to speak like this. Right at the beginning of the curve, I remember you saying that you were like, just have an investing mindset, Don't worry if you missed an investing trend because there's so many more. And
Is that what I sound like?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. You'd be like, oh, there's just so many more.
We're not doing accents, Sophie.
No, this is just... That was a microaggression. Anyway, I always remember thinking like, it's so easy for you to say because I don't feel like they're anywhere and I don't spot them very often. And it's really easy to get scarcity mindset towards that. But it's so true that the world and every industry is evolving so much every day. There's new trends that pop up all over the show. Like one of the ones that I've been thinking about lately is in all my exercise classes, I've been really staring at people's bums and being like, what brand are you wearing? What brand are you wearing? Because I'm just fascinated by the idea that Lululemon's starting to just not really be anywhere.
Absolutely fall off a cliff.
Yeah, it used to be everywhere. And now I'm seeing this one called Endamo or something everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And
it's like Hoka sneakers. Hoka.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
It's just thinking about what you're seeing heaps of and trying to be an early adopter, not as a consumer necessarily, but as an investor.
And look, I mean, whether this is a long-term trend or not, probably not. But, we try to teach about like long-term trends. It's a good activity, right? It's a good kind of behavior, trying to get into that behavior of spotting, investing in trends around you.
You also just don't have to take it so seriously. You're not going to go and put your life savings in Labubu, but maybe you want to put 50 pounds in.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal.
We've actually started a new segment in the club called What's on My Mind, and it's all about staying ahead of the curve. And it's things like this. It's literally things that I'm spotting from reading, living, all of that. It's just like getting inside my brain. What are some things that I'm spotting? They could be the start of big trends. They could just be tiny little trends, but it's helping people get into that investing mindset of looking around you with your eyes wide open.
If anyone wants to have a look at the Investing Club too, we've got a 7-day free trial. So we'll link that in the podcast show notes. Can we talk about this IVF stuff?
Yes. Yeah.
I, as you know, am quite interested in this because it's very much on my mind at the moment. I planned on doing this when I was in New Zealand and then I didn't.
It's so funny when you text me and you're like, can I call you? It's not work related. Like I instantly get a text from Soph. I'm like, oh, work. No. It's like you have to preface it though. No, it is.
Well, we've moved to Slack if anyone's interested. We've moved our comms to Slack because we're a proper business these days. So we no longer message on WhatsApp, which I think is good because it means I don't have to do that because I'm so worried if I want to talk to you about something non-work related at 7 p.m. that you're just not going to answer me.
It's also when you're like, can I call you? It's not work related. I'm like, oh gosh, what's happened?
Am I that much of a train wreck?
No,
it's always going to be a disaster.
It's always when my mum's like, can I call you? I'm like, oh, should I sit down? Otherwise, you just call me.
Yeah.
When someone's like, can I call you? I don't know why that gives me like, can I call you instantly? It's like,
well, it's kind of like along the lines of saying, we need to talk.
Yeah.
Which it's not, by the way, but I called Vic because I was panicking because I was in New Zealand and I really wanted to get my eggs frozen.
I just remember a really funny story. I remember, you were there actually. And I don't know what happened, but I just had this overwhelming feeling of I need to tell my family that I love them. And I sent them this really beautiful message.
This is sounding familiar, but I can't remember what was going on at the time.
And I was like, I love you guys. You mean so much to me. And I know I don't say it enough. And anyway, it was like,
we're
worried.
Empathetic.
Right? Like our family's empathetic, but not like that. Like they're out of the blue like that. Usually it's a birthday or something, Anyway. And then put my phone on flight mode, went into podcast recording. I think we must have recorded like 2 in a row. But I came out of that podcast record. Like my sister was banging at my front door. My dad had called me like 10 times. Everyone's like, are you okay? What's wrong? Like, and I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have sent that message. And gone off the grid. But it was just reminded
What
me
that
of like,
says to me is that you don't tell people you love them very often.
I know. I was like, okay, there's two things. I need to either do it more or, I was like, I think that's the takeaway is like to do it more. But sorry, that was just like a funny thing that I remembered. Yeah.
No, I'm so confused with what we were talking about. What were we talking about?
Oh, IVF, yeah.
So I called you and was trying to figure out what to do. So actually, for anyone that has done egg freezing, we've put together a little quiz. It takes like honestly 3 minutes or 5 minutes or something. We're going to link it in the podcast show notes because we are data gathering for how successful was it, how much did you spend, how many rounds did you have to do. There was one girl in there who, and we haven't shared this data yet, but we definitely will, or obviously anonymously, but she got 25 eggs from her egg freezing, and she put all of the stuff that she did to try and get her body like tip-top shape to help. And I was like, this is so helpful.
I wish they'd given me more information about that. It wasn't till after the fact they were like, oh, yeah, it's probably because you were stressed and probably because of this and this. And I'm like, well, it would have been nice to be like, hey, delay it a month, focus on, or 6 months, whatever, and just focus on getting your body into the best possible state. I don't know. Yeah. Sorry.
Because basically you're investing, 10,000 New Zealand for like £7,000 if you do one round of egg freezing. And that's an enormous investment. If it means you need to be, I don't know, taking folate acid or whatever it's called for 4 months, fine. But can you tell me so I can do it? Anyway, this is a huge global trend, isn't it?
Yes.
And
yeah.
potential investing opportunity actually outside of just thinking about your own bodily investment. It's the idea of it being a potential global investing trend, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. So I guess the overarching stats is that 1 in 6 people globally experience infertility, and the global...
Is that men and women? People to me says men or women.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because I think a lot of men don't talk about infertility.
Yeah, well, it's almost deemed if you can't get pregnant, the woman's problem, whereas it's like increasingly is a men's and woman's problem. Was that face like, shut up?
No, it just honestly all.
I was like, what am I saying wrong?
No, it makes me just so, sometimes I just get overwhelmed with rage.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, God, sometimes the world just annoys me so much, Sometimes I'm fine staying in my lane. I'm used to it. I get it. But in today's Curve Weekly, there's quite a lot of stats and some of the other things we're going to get to in a second where I'm just like, snooze fest. I'm just over it.
I know. It is, 1 in 6 people experience infertility globally. And so the global fertility market's worth nearly $40 billion US. I mean, it's expected to grow to about 60 billion. So anyway, it's growing 7 to 8% a year, which is higher than your normal kind of healthcare industry. So we all kind of know the reasons why. It's like, career. People want to pursue their career, so they're having children later. There's also cost of living. People want to get to a certain amount of money before they have children, and really just personal choice as well, people wanting to have children later. There's also increased demand for likes of egg freezing, all of that, LGBTQ plus communities also, so there is just so much that is, I guess, supporting this trend in terms of making it, grow and grow and grow and grow. And there are actually a few publicly listed IVF companies that you can invest in. There was one actually I invested in years ago when I was a little analyst, Virtus Healthcare in Australia. There is one in the US called Progeny, and then there's another one, Cooper Surgical, in the US as well. But most of them they make like fertility lab equipment or they do, whereas Virtus, and there's another one in Australia called Monash.
Oh, I've heard of Monash.
Those two are the two pure play fertility companies. But Monash, and this is the reason we're talking about it this week, has had an absolute blunder.
What happened?
2 blunders now.
Oh no.
It has put the
No.
the wrong embryo into the wrong person.
No way. That is.
Yeah. So this is the second time it's happened. It
gosh.
happened in April and now it's happened again.
At the same clinic.
Yeah. Sorry, different clinics, but same company. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So
what do they do? Because they can't take it out, right?
Well, it's just, I mean, I can't even imagine as a woman that happening. And you're so excited and I just can't even. Yeah.
But how would they know? How would they be like, oops, we've put the wrong one in? Because wouldn't that be when it's born, or would
There must be tests, or there must be, maybe you put in someone else's and you go to put theirs in and you're like, where is it? I don't know. That sounds very basic, but like I'm sure that
has the person this has happened to spoken out or shared anything? Because
I think there is a lot of investigations going on into how this happens, the repercussions, the financial compensation.
Sorry, can we just think about this from let's say this was you, let's say someone transferred the wrong embryo into you.
Yes.
Because once it's taken, because it's really hard, would it be a case where you're almost a surrogate for the person whose embryo it actually is, and then, or they swap and they put, your embryo on someone else? Like, how does that work?
Conversation.
Because I imagine,
I'll carry your baby, you carry mine. Like what? I don't even know.
Because also all of the pro-life arguments or thing, once it's in there and it's attached and it's growing, there's so many like moral and ethical boundaries.
I just can't even. Whoa. But anyway, the share price has fallen off a cliff, as you would expect. There's reputational damage. In fact, this is the second time now. Personally, I would not be going to Monash, for my fertility concerns. I'd be going to Virtus. So yeah. And I think that the reminder here is it's a global trend, and it's going to be a long-term trend. I think, I see this playing out for kind of years and years and years, but diversification is like so key, because if you were like, this IVF trend, I'm going to put all my shares in Monash, even if you'd split between the two pure plays of Virtus and Monash, or, you had a more kind of holistic healthcare ETF, you wouldn't be as impacted.
It's quite interesting, because as soon as we first started this chat and you were talking about those two brands, like is it Virtsu?
Virtus.
Sorry,
I've just spelled it wrong.
Virtus and Monash. And then when you started saying Monash had the blunders, I did think, I'll go invest in the other one. But Virtus, that's exactly what you're saying not to do, right? Because they could just as easily have a total blowout.
Yeah. I mean, their share price has actually done well out of this. So there would be people that are like, well, you know what? Customers are now going to go to Virtus. There's going to be increased demand for their products over Monash. So yeah, there'd be. But yeah, I think the lesson is you never know what's going to happen.
It's also really new technology.
Yeah.
So I think it's only been about 10 years that you've been able to freeze your eggs. Like that's, if you think about even just if we rewind in terms of the pill, really, it was only 50 years ago. People before that weren't able to control if they got pregnant or not. Now you can start to decide how long you want your fertility around, if you want to try and extend it through egg freezing. Like I think there's a huge amount of innovation that's going to be happening in this space, which also then means there'll be a lot of things going wrong, because it's not something that people really have a lot of experience with yet.
And it's also, there could be things like government funding that get introduced in terms of, because it is part of healthcare, and there is an increasing number of people needing to use IVF and fertility treatments, which is a positive thing, right? If you get government funding, but then that opens up to competition and other players coming in. So yeah, you're right. A new space that is in a very attractive sector always attracts competition. But then there's also reputation as well is really key. Do you want to go to the new player, or do you want to go to the one that's had a consistent track record?
That's so true, actually.
So it's like when you're dealing with health.
I mean, for me, when I was trying to navigate all the different clinics, I was so overwhelmed, particularly in London, because there's so many. And that's why we put this little spreadsheet together so we can kind of share. So yeah, if you've done it, whether it's the UK, New Zealand, anywhere, please put your details in. It's in the podcast show notes. We'll share the results. Because I think having almost like the top 3 that most people in the curve community have used and said are good is like just really helpful to narrow down.
Yeah, and it's kind of like fund managers, right? There's ones that are cheaper. There's ones that are better performing. It depends what you kind of want to go for. Quickly, I know we don't want to talk about Trump.
Yeah, we're trying to do a Trump-free week.
Yes, it's hard.
That is so hard.
But anyway, there's been news out that there has been, on April the 2nd was when he announced Liberation Day, and that's when he announced all these tariffs. Stock market fell massively, and then on fast forward, literally only kind of 6 days, the stock market started to go back. He started rolling them back, things started rebounding, getting way better. So it was massive stock moves, like a big fall like that, big rebound. And it has now been discovered that during that kind of 6-day period, there was over 700 trades done by members of the House of Representatives and their families. So remember we spoke.
What idiots.
Like we spoke, I don't know when it was. about how there was this law they were trying to introduce around people in government being able to trade.
They were trying to stop it, right?
Yeah, they're trying to be like, no, you're privy to some pretty influential information. You and your families cannot trade. Like, yeah.
Also,
or there's windows you can, right? It might be like only at the end of March and only, but they're set windows. So, there can't be any grey area around whether you knew information or not. So anyway, the fact that there's this many trades in such a short period of time when the market fell, people are being like, hang on a second, this is raising some serious ethical questions. Like, you were privy to information going on in the White House.
That they were bringing tariffs in and then they changed their mind.
Yeah. And I think the quick reversal has also put a lot of spotlight on that period of time.
Like, what was the intention in the first place?
Yeah.
Was it just to make heaps of money?
Yeah. So this is...
Who even leads the charge in the investigations and making decisions on this? Like, whose responsibility is it to find out what happened and put new rules in place?
So the SEC, so the Security and Exchange Commission in the US, is the kind of the police of financial markets, and there will be people that will be sending them tips in terms of like, hey, Mary, who is, I don't know, in the Department of Justice, she put on some trades, or hey, can you just look at this unusual behavior? Like, they would get sent stuff.
Oh my God, it sounds like the
time.
Ministry of Magic from like Harry Potter.
Yeah.
Where they're like, the smuggle born's done this.
Yeah. And then so there'd be like competitors do it to each other, right? Like if you and me had different hedge funds and I saw that you put on a trade and then made heaps of money, I'd be like, can you just look at Soph's trades on the 2nd of April?
It's almost like putting it, like dobbing each other in.
Yeah.
But with this though, what I don't understand is, does Trump have any influence over the SEC?
No.
So
I mean, not at this stage. He is getting pretty influential on everything right now. But
yeah, because I think that's what I feel as though he's controlling everything, which makes me think, is there going to be a time where, I don't know.
Yeah, but anyway, I think it's kind of reignited this political pressure of like lawmakers are not allowed to trade, particularly around sensitive news like this, because the whole reason the stock exchange and public markets are set up, there's huge rules around you can only trade on
public information.
Yeah, it's illegal to trade on material non-public information, and that's just to set an even playing field for everyone. Insider trading is based on if you are trading on material, and that means anything that's going to move a stock price, material non-public information. If you're privy to anything like that, you need to disclose it straight away, or go and blackout, which means your shares are almost in a trading halt. You can't trade them. So there'll be things like say the Curve was a public company and we got approached by a takeover opportunity and there was a big company wanted to buy us. We're instantly privy to material non-public information. So we would have to go to the stock exchange and go, can you just pause all trading on our shares because we need to deal with this takeover, this company that wants to acquire us, and it's massive news and we've just found out. So we don't want anyone else to find out and be trading on that news. So we need to just gather our thoughts essentially, and then we'll release a statement, and then it's public, and then anyone can trade on it. So yeah,
but that's when you talk about,
that's what they should have done here. When that tariff news came out, it should have been like no one, or when they were even talking about it. But see, this is so hard because laws
take a while to come in,
and policies take so long. So it's like, yeah.
One of the things that you talk about is, does this business or is this company founder owned? Is there a founder or someone that created the business that's still there that has a huge amount of shares? If they're selling heaps of shares or buying heaps of their own shares, it's generally either a green or a red flag.
Yep.
Because if they're buying more of their shares, they know something about positive future, earnings projections. How is that any different?
I don't mean they know something like they're going to be taken over next week or they're about to make a big acquisition. I don't mean that. It's more like they can see, I guess, the momentum that is happening, but they also only have windows, right, where they can buy and sell shares.
What, owners of companies?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
and
that.
Insider people, there's only like, because a CFO, for example, he or she might want to buy shares in their own company and they're allowed to, but they're privy to so much non-public information that is very material. So they have,
so they can
windows.
only trade when that is then public.
And it's usually once they've reported their financial results, then there's maybe a few days, a week or a month after that where they can buy and sell shares. So everyone has got the information that they had, and then it's something that happens. It's shit because it kind of undermines the trust in the market. It makes the market rigged.
It makes it feel gambly, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's just like, let's just even the playing field. Anyway, so that's that's what's happened and is, yeah.
Let's do a couple of quick fires because there's a couple of other interesting headlines. We don't really have time to go into them in too much detail, but let's just do some quick rounds.
Getty Images has merged with Shutterstock. I can never say Shutterstock. And its shares jumped massively. And I think this is a whole overarching trend of just the consolidation in kind of creative content and media. Like we've seen Spotify be on acquisition sprees. We've seen Disney and 21st Century Fox merge. We've seen Warner Media Discovery merge. There's been a lot of.
Well, it's because if you look at a lot of, even when I was looking through all the different streaming platforms, I was like, God, it's ridiculous. Yeah. There's 9. How stupid.
Like even our talk of Call Her Alex, so we've got to watch on Disney Plus. You're going to have that subscription.
Yeah,
then you
so
want to have
it makes sense that they're consolidating because Getty Images and Shutterstock are essentially stock imagery. It makes sense to bring it all together.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's easier for us as consumers. I think it's just when it ends up being there's only 1 or 2 and it's a big conglomerate, that's obviously not ideal. Yeah. But I think when it's also fragmented like it kind of is at the moment, it makes sense that there's all these mergers.
And there is concerns that you start to own, like social media players, right? Like their algorithms help dictate what we see and what we consume. So there is kind of concerns that when you get to a point that you own such a big media company, you start to dictate what people see, and then there's like ethical consumer.
But look, if the fact that
they need to
Meta
survive,
and Google and all these giant platforms are existing, I'm sure it's really, you've got to get pretty bloody enormous before someone's going to step in and say you're too big.
Yeah.
The fact that they're all still operating as their own businesses and no one's said, I mean, yeah, there's been fines and stuff, but no one's doing anything about it really.
It's like, cool, we'll find you 1% of your profits.
Yeah, like, oh, boo-hoo.
There's also been some cuts to global growth. So the World Bank, which as the name suggests is the Bank of the World, it has cut its global growth, which we knew was happening, right? We knew that all of this Trump tariff stuff was going to slow down global growth.
But do you basically mean that they have changed what they're projecting?
Yeah.
It's not that they've changed the outcome. They're just saying we're projecting this is going to happen.
Yeah, and it is now the lowest growth we've seen for the last 17 years.
Whoa.
Outside COVID and the kind of global financial crisis. So outside of like two massive big shocks to the world, this is the lowest growth we've ever seen. So
does that mean recession? What does it mean?
Recessions are 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. That's kind of the definition of a recession. So it's kind of country specific. So you don't usually, oh my God,
it gets me every time when you say specific.
You don't really have a global recession unless there's a whole lot of countries at once. And that was COVID and the global financial crisis.
But that's not what this is looking like.
No, it's just saying there's a massive slowdown and we kind of knew that. But each country could probably go into recession. But it's still growing. We're still growing. 2.3%, but yeah.
What's an average or a healthy growth, like global economy growth?
Good question. I'd say like
5?
Nah. You've got like India and China and stuff that are growing like 5, 6, 7%, and they kind of prop up the rest of the world. But round about probably 3.
Oh,
3%.
So
3% is like, I know, but like if you think what's had to change to move, even 0.1%. When you're talking about percentages on a massive scale. Anyway, yeah.
And we've got some stunning news to finish with. It's some very exciting, empowering, brilliant news that everyone is going to be absolutely thrilled to hear. And that is that we have more Davids.
So out of the top 20 highest paid CEOs of the S&P 500, there is more Davids in that list than women.
Standing ovation. Who's excited?
So go, David. That's great.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, so, I mean, it was Mark once upon a time.
Yeah. I was scrolling through this being like, is there any woman?
Same. I was like, is Jensen a woman?
No, that's a man.
No, it's a guy.
Jensen, NVIDIA CEO. Yeah.
Is there any men in this list? Like
Judith is
Where's Judith?
Judith's number 18.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Go, Jude. Her pay package is $42 million. Shit, yeah.
So the top one here is Rick Smith from Axon Enterprise, and they are a taser company, actually.
Oh my God.
I know. With like an underlying subscription. It's quite a unique
Who
story.
subscribes to a taser business?
No, it's the software. And anyway, it's quite an interesting story. Might talk about it in the club, actually.
What's Tim Cook at Apple? Is he the CEO?
Yep. Yeah. Steve Jobs
replacement.
Yeah. He's number 4.
Ted Sarandos, the Netflix CEO, 62 million.
These are wild numbers, right?
Wow, I can't even imagine having 1 million a year.
You've got 2 Netflix CEOs in there. That's crazy. Anyway.
Whoa. Can you even imagine someone presenting you your pay packet and saying it's 60 million?
You'd probably be like, why is it 60 and
what
not 70?
What would the stress be? Do you think it would be absolutely phenomenal, or do you think they're just so skilled that it's the same amount of pressure that most of us feel in our day-to-day jobs?
I mean, you have a pretty impressive team underneath you.
Gosh.
But there's also the risk associated with being a CEO of those companies, right?
But what is the risk, really?
Apple CEO, like you make a fundamentally wrong decision and the share price goes backwards, and I don't know.
I guess it ruins your reputation.
The pressure of taking over Steve Jobs' role. I can't even imagine that. Yeah. Anyway. So yeah.
Can I just say, I do think it's absolutely ridiculous that this is how much people get paid.
I know.
And I'm not saying that they don't have incredibly important, very stressful jobs, but when people aren't even being paid £25,000 a year, and there's some people in the world that are earning 165 million, that feels wrong.
I remember an inquiry that they did in Australia with the supermarkets, and they were like talking to the CEOs, and they were like, how much did your company earn? And they were like, billions. And how much did you get paid? And they're like, millions. And they're like, and how much is the average salary of a supermarket worker? And then they were like, yes, but we give lots of perks and blah, blah, blah. And they were like, oh, cool. And so do you get discounts as well that you can use in the supermarket? And he's like, yes. And he's like, do you use them? And he just like didn't answer. And I was like, do not tell me that you use the discounts. Anyway, it was just
to get some cheap cans of tomatoes.
I know.
Like, oh.
But it was also just so interesting that yes, there's people that I would love to know some of the average salaries of these people, like in terms of the places that they work. What is the average salary if you took out the CEO? What does that curve look like in terms of the average salary? Like Walmart.
There is no amount of responsibility that deserves that kind of pay disparity between. Yeah. I don't think. I think I understand working in an Apple shop compared to running the entire business requires a completely different skill set, experience, stressful.
And I like the sacrifice that these people would have made. Do you know? I don't know, actually.
But it's just an unfathomable amount of money.
A couple of million is fine.
Oh, who needs that much? What are you doing
Let
with
alone
that?
Stock. There'll be stock in there as well. Anyway.
Bit gross.
That is all. On that positive note, we will finish here.
Yeah. What else is happening this week? Do you have any fun personal things that you want to share or do? What's going on?
No.
I feel like we just need to lighten the mood a tiny bit.
Give me a joke, Soph.
Yeah, okay. I'm just trying to think if all my jokes. They're not worth telling again.
Yeah, true.
I went to Heim last night.
Oh, nice.
There was like a listing party in Dalston, which is like a cool kind of area.
Like they were playing?
They were playing their new music.
They were playing the new music.
It was like a listening party. So it was this really cool venue. Everyone's sort of sitting.
What is a listening party?
So they play the music, like the recorded stuff, and they're sitting on stage, like listening and singing along, and then they talk about the songs in between. So it's not live performance.
I thought you were like, you go along and listen.
Yeah, you do.
But they're not there.
Oh no, they're there.
I was like,
well, I got there and I was like, I feel like for £25, they shouldn't be here. Like that's weird to me, but they were, and they were so funny and cool. Yeah, I really love their music. That was fun.
Oh, yeah.
But do you know what was sad? I don't know if this is a trigger warning for eating disorders. One of them, the oldest one, who is she's so hilarious. I actually remember meeting her 10 years ago or something when Heim first started. They came on and were interviewed in one of the shows I was producing. And she was just a bundle of lols. She was hilarious.
Yeah.
They all walked on stage at the start of this and she was so thin. She looked like half the size of her sisters who looked completely normal. And I just was like, God, it's just so sad. Just eating disorders just take I don't know. And I was thinking, because I know people who are neurodiverse often are ones that are quite extroverted, quite funny, quite creative. I was like, I bet she's neurodiverse, and the interconnectedness between that and eating disorders is really close. And I was just looking at her sisters were drinking beer on stage and she was drinking water, and like just all the signs were there in terms of she was way more in her shell than she normally than she used to be. I was just like, fuck, this is just such a shit thing. It makes me so sad to see.
And we were going to finish on a positive
Oh,
note.
sorry. Fuck, I forgot
I
about
would
that.
really like to finish on giving a little birthday shout out to our editor.
Yes. Oh my God, great idea. That actually is such a good, I can't believe I didn't think of this.
Today
Yeah.
is our beautiful editor Emily's birthday, and
She's also not just an editor.
No,
she's
she's
not
like-
just an editor.
I
She's
know.
our like producer of everything.
I find it hard, like when people are like, what's her role, or who do you employ? And I'm like, she's the editor, but I'm like, but she does like so much more than that, you know.
She's like our
we need to come up with a new
I think her new role should be content lead or something.
content lead. Yeah, she's absolutely fantastic, and
She's 25 today.
oh, spring chicken.
She's honestly the kindest, most funny, hardworking, creative person ever, and we
She's
adore her.
The best person to have around, and is just the best energy, and
She works so hard, doesn't she?
so hard.
Yeah.
We could call her at midnight. She'd be like, yes.
She's
Yeah.
honestly just the dream.
We won't,
Emily,
don't worry.
the curve would be a total shit show without you. Thank you.
Please never leave.
Yeah.
And
No pressure, publicly asking her to never quit.
please never leave. No, but she is doing a rail trail.
Well,
at the
I
moment.
don't think I called it the rail trail, but
Interrail
it's the
or something. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
a Kentucky. It's like where
She's
you
having
go.
a sabbatical.
Yeah, as she very, very much deserves. And we hope, well, we will try to not let the curve fall apart while you're not here.
Yeah.
But please hurry back.
But happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
You are
we
very
love
loved.
you. Thank you so much for listening to The Curve Weekly. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with all the money, biz and stock market news. And if you like what you heard, we would love a review. Thank you.
Yes, we would love a review. But if you
Only
did
a good
hate
one.
it, please, don't leave one if you hate it. No, but in all seriousness, could you please leave a review? Because it really helps other people find our cute little podcast.
And we hope you have a good week and see you next Monday.
Bye.
Bye. Sweet. Yeah. See you next Tuesday. Lol. See you next Tuesday. I mean Monday.
No, actually, though, new episodes out every Tuesday. Okay, quickly. The Curve was created to empower and educate you about investing, but we are not financial advisors.
Our platform exists for educational purposes only, and it doesn't provide personalized investing advice for your individual needs and should not be relied upon to make an investment or financial decision.
And always remember to do your own research before making any investment or financial decision.
We're here for any knowledge and support you need, but the final call is always yours.
And thanks for being here.
You got this.
Yeah, we know you got this.